Hi, and welcome back to the second deck we have for you this week. I am playing a cool-looking elf strategy that takes advantage of Collected Company, which has become a dominant card in the standard format, but also has some nice tweaks on what you're used to seeing from elf decks in standard. So if we look here, we've got our pretty standard package of elf creatures. I think the important new addition is Sylvan Advocate, just incredibly powerful creature that happens to be an elf.
Yep.
So that really helps out the power of this deck. And another odd addition is Thornbow Archer. Not a card we have seen a lot of, even in limited.
Yeah, not a card that I've registered in my Magic Origins aggressive black decks.
I have registered it in the top 8 of a Grand Prix. So,
jeez, subtle, humble brags.
But Thornbow Archer, it's a 1-mana 2/2 if your opponent doesn't have an elf, which is a fine rate. There are a few incidental elves, and Michael is playing Sylvan Advocates of his own, so we'll have to be wary of that. But I think it's important to just have a critical mass of cheap creatures, and it's the next best 1-drop, because they don't give us Elvish Mystic anymore. Because this deck is really focused on going wide and taking advantage of some cool anthems. So, as we saw in Michael's Tokens deck, he has Gideon and Nissa as his anthems. We have Nissa, Voice of Zendikar, and Drana, Liberator of Malakir, a card that got a reasonable amount of hype during spoiler season for Battle for Zendikar, but hasn't seen a lot of play, and is really impressive in this deck because you can just flood the board really, really quickly between your cheap creatures, Dwynen's Elite making 2 bodies, and Collected Company making 2 or even more bodies because of the Elite, and then even pumping plant tokens that your Nissa makes. So you can turn your elves into this really impressive army of creatures and have this nice, cohesive, swarming strategy that is topped off by Shaman of the Pack, giving you a lot of reach.
And vampires have pointy ears too, right? So it's like not even... She fits in, right?
It's on theme.
Yeah, she fits in.
Yeah, pointy ear theme deck. Perfect. Another important thing to note is Gnarlroot Trapper's second ability. You can tap to give an attacking elf death touch until end of turn, and that's really important if we don't get the Anthem synergies really rolling. We've got a bunch of small creatures, and a single Reflector Mage or Sylvan Advocate could really stymie this deck's early aggression, and having your mana creature get you ahead and then serve double duty in the mid game, being able to force your attacks through some defensive creatures is really important.
Yeah, when you're going wide, usually you're sacrificing a creature against an opposing blocker for 2 or 3 damage, essentially, but this just makes it so that your opponent has no good blocks.
Yeah, and trading with an Elvish Visionary and 1/2 of Dwynen's Elite or Thornbow Archer is really poor. And the 2/3s from the other side aren't really going to trade with Sylvan Advocate being a 2/3 itself. So not a ton more to talk about here. I've included a couple Murderous Cuts just to have a little bit of removal, a little bit of interaction in the deck. It's possible that you just want to go all in and play like 4th Nissa and even a 4th Drana or another 2-mana creature of some sort just to really hammer home going wide. But I think with 27 hits off of Collecting Company, we should be fine there. The mana base is pretty straightforward as well. We've got our full 8 dual lands. Quagmire, again, supports the go wide plan, but just turn 4 or 5 when you've extended your hand. Now you can add an extra creature to your attack, get a little bit more damage in.
Also tough to block.
Yeah, another creature that's tough to block. And then I've incorporated some of the fetch land, battle land mana base, even though there's no red splash in this deck, just because with a black creature and a green planeswalker as 3 drops, the mana requirements in this deck are more stretched than normal for a 2-color deck, and being able to go like dual land on 1, some sort of basic on 2, and then fetch for whichever one you need on 3, or basic and the appropriate battle land off of fetch land will be fairly important for this deck to curve properly. So that's about it for the main deck for Elves. Join us a minute for the sideboard. Okay, welcome back. Here we have the sideboard of the Elf deck I'm playing today. A couple standard sideboard cards we've seen a lot in standard. We've got Duress, really important against Jeskai Black, and actually very good against ramp decks as well. Sort of the proactive Dispel. We've seen both of those in and out of sideboards in standard pretty frequently, and we don't have blue mana, but we have black mana, so Duress.
Work with what you got.
Yep. The Fleshback Marauders are actually really nice in this deck. It's important to have creatures function as spells in your collected company deck, so that when you're sideboarding, you don't make your collected companies too weak. And Fleshback Marauder is a perfect removal spell for large creatures that will get in the way of your swarming game plan. And the Elf deck has a lot of incidental sort of, don't want to say useless, but less impactful bodies to throw away to expendable bodies to throw away to Fleshback Marauder between Elvish Visionary, Dwynen's Elite, maybe a Gnarl Root Trapper that's not doing too much, or just throw away the Fleshback itself. So this is just a great extra removal spell to have.
Plants.
Yeah, and plant tokens from Nissa. Perfect. The plummets are pretty typical. The deck doesn't play very good defense against flying creatures and can pretty easily get raced by a quick draw out of the Dragon's deck because of the explosive potential of Thunderbrick Regent into Culligan.
Mm-hmm.
So having a couple answers to a big flyer so that you can buy yourself 2 or 3 extra turns for the low cost of 2 mana, I think is very important. One of the next card is one of the big draws to being Elves. I think we've seen a lot of the this kind of effect, sort of infest effects, be good against decks like a Tarkared, and this one is one that is particularly good because you don't see this kind of effect out of another aggressive deck because you can't really play a Wrath of God that's going to kill all your own creatures.
Right.
This one specifically does not kill your Elves,
and
doesn't kill your Drana.
Just throw all your plants away. No big deal.
Yeah. Not the best with Nissa's plants, but we'll take it. I think because it doesn't hit your Elves, this card is also quite good against Bant Company and Rally, because both decks are trying to flood the board with creatures, and you're going to end up being at parity or a little behind if they are able to keep pace with you, because our creatures are a little bit better pound for pound.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to set up a big swing with Eyeblight Massacre, which just makes all of their blocks horrific, because they're left with a bunch of 1/1s and 0/1s after it resolves, even if they don't kill them, can set up a really devastating attack.
Yeah, that's definitely the key point here. Even though a lot of the decks have moved towards 2/3s, the fact that it doesn't affect your own creatures means that, like Ross said, you get a great attack on the board.
The bottom row here is sort of our go long cards. Guiltleaf Winnower, another creature, even though you can't hit it off Collecting Company, important when we're trying to go wide, that can function as a spell. And this one's specifically very good against Siege Rhino and the Ilk. We have the 4th Nissa, which very likely could belong in the main deck because this card is really good. But I think this card is just really important against decks like Mardu Green and Jeskai Black, so that you can continuously make a stream of threats, and eventually they're going to have to answer them, or you'll ultimate or -2 a couple times, and you'll have a horde of 1, 2, or 2, 3 plants that will quickly end the game. And then Evolutionary Leap. Again, we've got a bunch of incidental bodies around with Evolutionary Dwynen's Elite, and this card has been a pretty...
I love Evolutionary Leap. It is definitely like one of my pet cards. It is just unbeatable if your opponent is just trying to grind you out.
Yeah, it really is. You just keep generating threat after threat after threat, and their removal spells just don't do anything anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But it's only Crackling Doom. So this is a great card in our really heavy creature deck, a lot of cheap creatures, so that we can flood a little bit and then be able to extend our board, hold up a little bit of mana, make our opponent's ability to interact basically useless, and win a long game that a deck like this normally has no business winning.
Yep.
So that is it for the sideboard. Come back for the games.